Welcome Classic Rock fans to one of my 10 of the best, and today I want to look at 10 bands that have achieved phenomenal success after replacing, or perhaps because of replacing, a key member. As always at this juncture, I ask you to click like, subscribe and do all that stuff, and whilst you're down there, do check some of the links below this video for ways you can support the sterling work done here at Classic Album Review. Become a Patron or anything, or even just like the Facebook page. I mean, Facebook is perhaps the only social media thing that I do. I don't do Twitter or Twitch or Snatch or anything like that. Engagement is the key. Anyway, that's enough of the hard sell. Let's get straight into this video, shall we? First band, number 10 on my list, is when Steve Perry joined Journey. But this band were suffering from what can be described as dwindling sales. Columbia Records wanted a new direction. They felt that direction might come in the guise of the singer Robert Fleischman. Forgive me if I've said that name wrong. It looks like Fleischman on paper, but I might have pronounced it wrong. Unfortunately, he fell out with the band's management, and his tenure with the band was rather short-lived. Hence, they roll in Steve Perry. Steve Perry's debut with the band was at the old Waldorf in October 1977, but in terms of that anthemic AOR rock, Steve Perry was the man, I think. Number 9 was when Mick Taylor replaced Brian Jones. Now, I mean no disrespect to Brian Jones, he was an immense musician that really coloured and brought different instrumentation and arrangements to those early Stones numbers. It was the founding member as well, let's not forget that. But Mick Taylor's consummate guitar skills are absolutely incredible. You know, from the get-go being thrown into the deep end of that Brian Jones tribute gig in Hyde Park. And his impact with the band cannot be overstated in any way. I mean, most people list their favourite Rolling Stones albums. You can pretty much guarantee it's going to be Let It Bleed, Sticky Fingers and Exile on Main Street tend to be the ones that dominate the list. Brian Jones brought so much texture and variety to those early Stones albums. You know, but for my mind, the band really evolved after ditching the vagaries of the counterculture, that psychedelic album, Satanic Majesty's Request. Although a thoroughly interesting listen, that jaunt around the astral plane didn't quite work for them, I think, and it's certainly seen as the very poor relation to Sgt. Pepper. But after that's when this band reimagine themselves and they start to produce material that actually questions the idealism of the counterculture, which is when they become really interesting and establish themselves as perhaps the greatest live band ever. Anyway, so for me, when Mick Taylor replaces Brian Jones in the Stones. Number 8 is when Justin Hayward joins the Moody Blues. He brings out not only his guitar skills, but that mellifluous voice of his. Let's not forget Justin Hayward, I think he'd auditioned for the Animals prior to joining the Moody Blues. But it was the departure of key members, and more notably, of course, Denny Laine. I felt there was an opening for a singer. But it's Justin Hayward that really helps this band to take off, combined, of course, with the ethereal tones of Mike Pinder's Mellotron. There's something very airy and spatial about their sound. Of course, John Lodge joins about this time from El Riot, and Justin Hayward was formerly in the Wild 3. But they certainly shaped this band's sound in terms of keeping with the psychedelic mood of the times. Moving away from these R&B standards that the band had been playing through numerous working men's clubs for years. Justin Hayward brought his own penned song Nights in White Satin about the breakup of a relationship, and my word, their sound was very, very clearly defined from that point onwards. And let's not forget Tuesday Afternoon, a number that's dominated by Mike Pinder's Mellotron. Anything with Mellotron in is worth listening to as far as I'm concerned. But it's that album, it's not their first album, of course, but many deem it to be the first album in a way. Days of Future Past, that hack where they were supposed to perform one of Dvorak's symphonies, but kind of took it in their own direction. Number 7 is Genesis. Of course, this one deals more with a departure than an addition. In a way, it's the departure of Peter Gabriel. There's no doubt this band enjoyed more commercial success when Gabriel left. However, I have to say, artistically, I much prefer the Gabriel era. Albums like Foxtrot and Selling by the Pound are just absolutely remarkable. Trick of the Tail is another wonderful, wonderful Genesis album, post-Gabriel of course, but it certainly would be my top 3. It was that embracing of that more saleable pop sound that really sees this band go stratospheric, commercially at least anyway. All perhaps initiated, I think, a few years previously when Phil Collins clears that path from the drum kit to the front of the stage. Number 6 is Steve Howe joining Yes. Well, Steve Howe and Wakeman, really. Wakeman joined a little bit later on. Musically, I think this band will help to go stratospheric when Steve Howe joins. He'd already established himself in terms of his guitar chops in bands like Tomorrow and Bodast. And he brought that jazz-styled, finger-picking rock, sort of melding of Carl Perkins, Django Reinhardt and Frank Zappa. He brought that to the table. Steve Howe's playing adds real drama, light and shade to this music. To my mind, he was a vital and missing ingredient to the Yes sound, or that what would become defined as the Yes sound. And it sees this band morph from the more whimsical, psychedelic, choral rock and pop band to the prog behemoths that would be in the 70s, competing up there with the likes of King Crimson and Genesis. And Wakeman, what he brings to the party is remarkable as well. Moving away from that very Hammond-drenched sound that we got with Tony Kaye to a whole range of Moogs, gadgetry, capes and curry. His classical training a welcome addition to the mix. Steve Howe, interestingly, brought over some interesting guitar parts from his previous bands, as I've said, Tomorrow and Bodast, which he adds to the Yes sound, more notably tracks like Starship Trooper and Close to the Edge, to name but a few. Number 5 is Fleetwood Mac and the signing of Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks. After Bob Welch and Dave Walker depart, this duo helped this band on its journey towards chiffon scarves and mainstream rock accessibility. I mean, Fleetwood Mac had morphed from that blues band into a sort of psychedelic, folk, poppy modalities that were going on prior to the signing of Buckingham and Nicks. And with the signing of those two rock's turbulent answer to Peters and Lee, the writing was on the wall, or the rumours was on the wall, I should say. You know, a monster was born, with divorced lawyers and coke dealers in the wings. No doubt this band was destined for superstardom, all those boomers in chinos and boxes of Kleenex, soaking up all that heartbreak like sponges. And no doubt the popularity and success of this band skyrocketed with the Rumours album, and it's an album that deserves all its plaudits as far as I'm concerned. It's a beautifully produced and performed and well-written meditation on the nature of betrayal. And as such, it is certainly an accomplished album. Although I'd have to say at this point that I would be happy to live out my days never ever hearing another song from this album. Number 4 is the replacement of Rod Evans with Ian Gillan in Deep Purple. As well as, of course, Nick Simper was replaced by Roger Glover, who they'd purloined from episode 6. When this band finally decided they no longer wanted to be vanilla fudge and just play hard, abrasive British pop, Ian Gillan and Roger Glover made a monstrous contribution to this band, arguably resulting in perhaps the greatest hard rock album ever. Black Knight, of course, that wonderful song that was written in a heartbeat from a purloined riff from a Ricky Nelson number, defines this period, although this song did not appear on the album. But Ian Gillan's presence, stage presence, size, and that glass worrying shriek of his certainly brought something to the mix, as well as the very solid work of Roger Glover. They embraced elements of hard rock prog and became a vital ingredient in the burgeoning UK metal sound. And to this day, most fans consider the Mark II lineup to be the definitive lineup of this band. Number 3 is a signing of Bruce Dickinson for Iron Maiden. Many fans consider Number of the Beast to be Iron Maiden's first album. Of course, it's not. But it's that, to me, it's that album that really breaks them and makes them. No disrespect to Paul Di'Anno, but Dickinson had operatic pretensions in kind of where he was heading vocally. And his voice was the perfect instrument to give Maiden that sense of grandeur that they so benefited from. With those early Maiden albums, the building blocks were certainly there. You had the Eddie mascot, Derek Riggs, I think, was on board very early on, but I think Dickinson's voice takes it to another level. I'll never forget as a wee lad in short trousers watching Iron Maiden perform Run to the Hills on Top of the Pops. After their first 2 albums, I read that Paul Di'Anno was struggling with addiction issues. He had to my mind, he had a very punky, quite earthy voice. For me, Maiden needed a more operatic range to match the musical ambitions of this band. Number 2 is when David Gilmour joins Pink Floyd. My word, what a shift in identity there was, moving away from all that Hilaire Belloc and Lewis Carroll childlike psychedelic whimsy that we got with Syd Barrett. They did away with all the sprites and gnomes to become effectively an instrumental band for a while. Long spatial pieces which Gilmour has dismissed as psychedelic noodling. They tried to emulate or copy what Syd brought to the table, but with not very much success. Source for the Sequels is a bit of a hodgepodge of an album. It ranges from kind of Syd Barrett-esque type numbers, and Sid's on a couple of numbers, but it's largely a Sidless affair, and that avant-garde sprawl that is a title track. So the band not really sure which direction they should be going and embark on this sonic landscaping. But it forced Waters to take the reins, taking the band away from all that fairy tale aesthetic, concerning itself more with philosophical and political concerns. And Gilmour, he brings a musical orthodoxy and grace to this music that defines the band's sound in the 70s. Him and Richard Wright had a much sounder musical grounding in terms of structure and musicality, and of course that voice of his is wonderful. All these elements combine beautifully, and as they try to find themselves, which eventually sees them experimenting with stage designs and conceptual art and God knows what else, at sound effects, that drives them towards their conceptual masterpiece of 1973. Whose iconic prism still adorns millions of t-shirts, mugs and baby grows in this jamboree of mass consumerism. Money indeed. Number 1 is when Neil Peart replaces John Rutsey in Rush. My word, this was a seismic shift. They moved the band's sound metamorphosized from being kind of Led Zeppelin wannabes to embracing more philosophical and much deeper concerns, and certainly aids them on their journey to these conceptual behemoths they would be in the 1970s. Peart brought his love of reading and philosophy to the lyrics. You know, their first album, I think, where Peart really exerts himself, is Caress of Steel, as even before his Ayn Rand inspired piece 2112. Peart's dedication to musicality and writing brought a whole new dimension to this band, made the band's compositions truly exceptional. Kimonos aside, this band really etched themselves into the classic rock consciousness with meditations on uncoolness, mass hysteria, and mythical beasties, of course. It's like Tolkien meets Salinger. There's the full-on progness of albums like Hemispheres, to the medieval Hey Nonny Nay hanky waving of Farewell to Kings. Beautifully crafted masterpieces that would see them edge towards their fully realised album, which is Moving Pictures in my opinion. I also love the very synth-drenched stuff they did in the 80s. In fact, I'm beginning to love that more than some of the stuff they did in the 70s. I absolutely adore the Signals album and the icy textures of Grace Under Pressure. Anyway, so there you have it. That's my top 10 bands that have gone stratospheric after changing key personnel. I hope you enjoyed this list, and if you're still watching, if you haven't switched off yet, I want to thank you so much for doing just that. Check out some of the cards that should be appearing up there now, and other than that, I'll leave you with, I hope you're staying well and healthy and COVID-free. But more importantly, of course, is that you keep listening.